Welcome to the Electric Scooter Podcast, episode 32. Why even ride a scooter? Why do people ride scooters? You've got your reasons, I've got mine. So this episode consists of the top 5 reasons to ride a scooter. Let's get into it.
Check yourself before you wreck yourself, because it's time for the ESP's Top 5.
Yeah, what up, scooter heads? Time again for the ESP, Electric Scooter Podcast, Top 5. Why did it take so long to do this? The top 5 reasons to even ride a scooter. You know, I guess if you don't know, what are you even doing listening to this podcast? But try to keep it fun. And that is number 1. Because riding a scooter is fun. That is the reason that I ride scooters. I have 5 scooters, different scooters for different things. I got one for going to the market. I got one for cruising around town. I have 2 Wolf Warriors, one with the street tires, one with the knobby tires, and then I got one that's easy to pack up. It's the Fluid Freeride Horizon. It folds up into a small package so I can toss it in the back of my trunk and travel somewhere and get out and just use it for short trips. Fun. Scooters are fun. I know people have them for other reasons like transportation that they rely on to get back and forth to work or school. But my number 1 reason clearly is fun. I don't just use it for things that I have to do. It really is for fun, enjoyment. I go off-road. I pack my scooter into my DIY van. Boy, that's another topic. I got to talk to Ginger on Wheels because he is DIYing a van as we speak. He's probably a lot more technologically savvy than I am, so I don't know if he wants advice from me. But he's doing the same thing 2 years after me. I bought a van and I added a refrigerator, a microwave, some complicated, well, for my tiny brain anyway, electrical setup that would allow me to use AGM batteries to charge things. Well, actually to use items while I am boondocking, and boondocking means you don't have power, you're just parked somewhere. And I've circled the United States, and when I think of things that I want to do, first thing uppermost in my mind is where can we go that would be cool on a scooter? And I often take 2 scooters because sometimes I go visit friends who are non-scooter heads. And you've heard a couple episodes to where I was interviewing friends and acquaintances who are not scooter heads, and I interview them before they ride and after they ride and get their opinion. Numero 2. Number 2.
Cha-cha Bucci, cha-cha Bucci, roll call!
Cost effective. The cost of ownership and the price of scooters. And when I say price, I don't mean the actual price necessarily of the scooter itself, because you can buy scooters for $250. I have a GoTrax that costs $240-something bucks. And you can pay for a Ryan over $7,000. What I mean is compared to other similar vehicles, they're pretty closely matched with costs that you would have with a bicycle, in my personal experience. But when you compare it to a car or a motorcycle and the cost of registration, fuel, title, inspections, the cost of the vehicle itself, insurance, I just listened to a lawyer talking in England saying that they have a requirement for insurance, anybody that rides a scooter. And we don't have that in the United States as far as I know. And I don't know that if you ever got pulled over by a police officer, if they would ask for paperwork. In fact, Zero to Epic crossed the United States from Boston, Massachusetts to Newport, Oregon on Route 20, and he had 0 run-ins with the law. He did have a couple conversations, just, hi, how's it going? Cool, oh, check that out, kind of thing. But no, what are you doing here? Let me see some paperwork or anything like that. And the cost of fuel is pennies. I don't know exactly what it is, but I've given the data many, many times on this podcast of $20 worth of fuel starting in Berkeley, California, which is right near Southern California. If you put that $20 into a Corolla, it will get you to Reno, Nevada, just across the California border. If you put it in a Tesla, it'll get you all the way to Salt Lake City, Utah. And if you spend $20 in fuel on an average electric scooter, and when they say average electric scooter, that usually means one of two, either the Xiaomi or the Segway 9Bot Max. $20 in either one of those scooters will get you from Berkeley, California to Dubai in the Middle East. So don't tell me they're not cost effective. They are. It really depends on what you're using it for. But for me, number one, obviously, was fun. Number 3, convenience. I could go on and on about convenience, and you could think of your own scenarios. Instead of sitting in bumper-to-bumper traffic, gagging on carbon monoxide, you just whiz by everybody. You take the little shortcuts through the park to get to where you're going. When you get to where you're going, you have a compact vehicle that can fold up and you can carry, in some instances, upstairs, put under your desk at work, or you can ask your teacher at school, do you mind if I put my scooter here in the corner? And most teachers, in my experience, are going to be really okay with that. And it gives everybody a good sense that they are doing something positive. Scooters are convenient. There's no argument. Now, number 4 and number 5, I actually switched around. I initially wanted to save my number 4 for last because it's something that I hadn't thought of until I started researching the scooter issues that are such hot topics in the United Kingdom. And one of the things that was brought to my attention during that research is
fear.
Not fear as in being afraid. Fear is just the number 4 in German. Social distancing. Do you want to sit on a bus or a train with a whole bunch of people spewing microbes into the air that you suck into your respiratory system? Or would you rather be out in the fresh air on a scooter? Social distancing. Bet you didn't see that one coming. And now, the reason I saved the final issue to number 5 is because it's going to provoke me. It's going to, what's the word that the kids are using these days? Trigger. It's going to trigger me. And I'm going to go into a rant. Can anybody guess? So far we've had fun, price, convenience, social distancing. What is the big overarching elephant in the room involved with electric scooters? As far as reasons to ride an electric scooter. For some people, this would have been number 1. But my number 5 is global warming and the environment. But there are a lot of confusing data out there, or in South Africa, data. I walked into a convenience store in Cape Town to top up my phone SIM card with some data. You spend whatever, a couple bucks, and it gives you however many minutes. And they were calling other workers to the register. Hey, can you come up to register number 5? We got a foreigner here who's asking us something, and we can't understand what he's saying. I'm saying data. I want to top up data for my telephone. I'm pulling my telephone out of my pocket and showing it to him. These people speak English, and I speak English. And one of the ladies puts her hand on her hip and talks to the original cashier and says, data. He wants to purchase data. So the data that is coming out of really legitimate research think tanks can still be totally skewed. Case in point. Researchers at North Carolina State University, and I linked to this on the internet through MIT, fairly reputable establishment of higher learning. But they were quoting a paper from researchers at North Carolina State University that conducted a life cycle assessment tallying up emissions from making, shipping, charging, collecting, and disposing of scooters. After one of the researchers at North Carolina State University rented a scooter, and the receipt that came back stated, your ride was carbon free. And he or she asked of themselves, huh? What? Really? Let me tell you something. Just because when you see a battery-operated electric scooter and it's not belching pollution out of the tailpipe, that doesn't mean they're emissions-free. They are, in my mind, from what I know and have been able to glean, they are eco-friendly. I can make that assumption, and I think on this podcast I can put the word out and feel relatively assured that that is the truth. They are more eco-friendly than most modes of transportation. Not maybe walking. Riding a bicycle, I'm sure, is more eco-friendly. But I heard something during my UK scooter topic research that kind of triggered me a little bit, and that was ride a bicycle so at least you'll get some exercise. You think you're not getting exercise on a electric scooter? I go out into the desert and I go up and down hills and in and out of ditches and over grapefruit-sized rocks that I'm negotiating. And I also surf. And surfing, obviously, you're expending way more calories because you're paddling to get out to the waves. But people think once you're on the wave, you're just moving your hips a little and gliding along. But as with scooters, you are using muscles that you don't normally use in everyday life. You are burning calories, and you're stretching and bending and using your joints, your thigh muscles, your calf muscles, the muscles in your feet, your torso, your neck that you normally in everyday life just don't use. So saying that riding an electric scooter doesn't burn any calories and it's not healthy for you, I would assume that riding a bicycle, you burn more calories, assuming it's not an electric bike. But don't say you don't get exercise on an electric scooter. Anybody listening to this who owns an electric scooter will tell you when you come back from a long or arduous ride, you are tired. You expended some energy. And when I get back from the desert, I feel like I just got back from the gym. I am beat up. I didn't even mention my arms, holding onto the handlebar and negotiating these grapefruit-sized rocks and all that kind of thing. You do expend energy riding electric scooters. So that's a lot of, what do we call it? Hooey? It's just not true. It's just not a factual statement. So an analysis of data that was conducted by a company called Quartz, they're a data gathering company, they use, we have in the States, we have Bird and Lime. Those are two of the biggest. I know in England they have Voy, and there's a lot of other companies. A lot of companies even in the United States. But they used analysis from Bird's fleet in Louisville, Kentucky. And here's why the information you're about to hear is skewed, slanted, and provides an untrue portrait of the effects of electric scooters on global warming and the environment. The average scooter lasts, in Louisville, Kentucky, owned by Bird, 28.8 days. And Bird itself acknowledged that, well, they wouldn't give out figures, but they publicly stated that their scooters only last about a month or two. So when you're gathering data or data on electric scooters and how they affect the environment, you're doing things such as weighing the materials, the raw materials, the manufacturing process. That factory's spewing smoke into the sky. The electricity used to charge the vehicles is really the smallest component. So here's my argument. And that's that if you have a privately owned vehicle that lasts more than 28.8 days, I don't know how many years they're going to last. I haven't run any to the ground because I have 5 of them, and I use them all differently, so they keep fairly low miles on them. But I do beat them up pretty hard, especially the Wolf Warrior with knobby tires that goes into the desert. But if you are taking care of your scooter, it's going to last more than 28 days. Let me tell you, who's going to spend $1,500 to $2,500 on something and not take care of it to the point that it only lasts on average 28.8 days? That's ridiculous. And how about if you combine that with, maybe you charge it with renewable energy? I don't know what you got on your property. You got solar panels. You got a little windmill out there in the Australian outback that's pumping out watts, and you charge your electric scooter using any of those methods, and there are many more. Some places generate electricity through waterfalls and dams and nuclear energy and all kinds of things like that. So this entire study that I'm about to reveal the information on is bogus. The data is accurate, but assuming a scooter lasts 28.8 days, the major share of emissions comes from fleets of vehicles, rental vehicles, navigating around a city. And then they have to get in cars, the company that is, like Lime and Bird, collecting the scooters that are thrown across people's yards, they're laying on sidewalks, wherever they happen to be. And then they have to take them to some central charging location. And then they have to return them to one of these locations where people go to pick up scooters if they want to rent one. Generally, it'll be a street corner or someplace where tourists commonly pass by so that it's convenient for them to jump on an electric scooter without a helmet and sometimes drunk. Here's a few things that they mentioned in the paper. Again, based on rental scooters and scooters lasting, let's say, rounded up to 29 days, lifespan of 29 days. The paper found that scooters produce about half the emissions of a standard automobile. It's still only 50%, even considering all those factors that I gave you. It would produce, given all those factors, 200 grams of carbon dioxide per mile. And cars, on average, produce 415 grams. But here's another factor that goes into it, and there is some veracity that in North Carolina, they looked at e-scooter riders in Raleigh, to be specific, North Carolina. Only 34% of people riding that scooter would have used a personal car or Uber or some other ride-sharing service like Lyft to spit out the 415 grams. So they weren't going to get in a car anyway. That's 34%. So you can knock that off, that wasn't really safe. They were just joyriding or having fun. But nearly half of them said they would have biked or even walked. 11% would have taken the bus, and 7% could have just skipped the whole trip altogether. So when you knock all those out, then the contribution that scooters make, or the detriment that scooters have on the environment, goes up, and the contribution goes down. The bottom line of the paper was that 2/3 of the time, rental scooters generate more greenhouse gas emissions than whatever the alternative is, like a bunch of people stuffed on a bus, breathing each other's microbes. So even though the data is true, it's still bogus, because they're assessing the environmental impact by the pollution created extracting, producing, and delivering raw materials to make the scooters. That's like half. Cars, bicycles, they all have to be dug out of the ground, the ore anyway, and then smelted, and all that creates emissions too. But how much the emissions add up to on a per mile basis really depends on how long scooters actually last. And I maintain that privately owned scooters last longer than 28.8 days. Rental scooters get tossed into rivers and lakes. People throw them off of buildings. They set them on fire. They use them in stunting. There's a lake right near Oakland, California, called Lake Merritt. And in one single month, I don't know how often they do this, but in 1 month, they dug 60 scooters out of the lake. I should say they fished them out of the lake. Fishing for scooters today. Want to come along? Caught 60 of them last time. Well, here's a statement from the huge corporation Lime. And hard to argue. This study is largely based on assumptions and incomplete data that produces high variability in the results. Yeah, dude, to say the least, I am in agreement with that. Lime believes that micromobility will reduce pollution and mitigate climate change. I don't know, it won't mitigate it. It'll help mitigate it maybe through clean and efficient modes of transportation. And we're making rapid advances in technology and operations that are helping us become a more sustainable company. There you have it. End of the rant. And to recap, the 5 reasons you ought to be riding a scooter. Number 1, it's fun. Number 2, cost of ownership. Number 3, convenience. Number 4, social distancing. And number 5, global warming.
Electric Scooter Podcast Top 5.
Back by popular demand, the Electric Scooter Podcast Top 5. And to be perfectly clear, that whole rant that I went on, the reason that I maintain the data can be accurate but skewed is it was all based on a scooter's lifetime being 28.8 days. So they obviously just looked at rental scooters. So whatever statistics and facts you heard in that study, they're just not real world, or they're not applicable to those of us who own our own scooters and maintain them and ride them for years and years. Don't let anybody tell you that electric scooters aren't any better than combustion engines for the environment, because they are. Well, that about wraps up the Electric Scooter Podcast, episode 32. Stay tuned next week, and until then, keep the shiny side up and the dirty side down.